I want you to know I'm being challenged by Gemma to give a speech without slides because she believes that my speaking technique is poor and I just read off my slides. But we're not here to discuss that.
That's in your 10 out of 10.
Okay. I want to thank Gemma for making a very interactive session on what a 10 out of 10 staff member can be. And before we kick off, I want to carry over an acknowledgement of country. I want to thank the traditional custodians of the land on which we work so that we can give this talk and continue to learn together. And as we go into this talk, which I've called personal identity and personhood, I want you guys to think about the concept of identity and what goes into it. And in particular for Aboriginal people, it's very well documented that they have a personal identity and a connection to the land that forms so much of what they want. And as we come to terms with concepts of loss of personal identity, blurring your personal identity, I really want you guys to take a moment to think about what it would mean to Aboriginal people to lose their land, which is such a large part of their identity, and what impact that might have on them as people, and how it might present outwards. Okay, let's get started. Now, a quick preamble before we start into my talk on personal identity and personhood. All right, so before we start discussing this, I want to say that last year we put in a lot of emphasis and effort on updating our care plans, our accounts, and our documentation to have them have more of a living, vibrant, personal feel, okay? We understand that it took more time, more effort, more training, and more QA to make this change happen. I don't think it's unreasonable to ask, is this actually important, all right? Is there better stuff to focus on, all right? Is this really making me better at my job? Is this serving any purpose for my clients? I think they're all very reasonable questions, all right? And to be fair, you know, there could be other priorities. There could be things that you guys personally value more, like better clinical development, understanding new programs. But what I want to tell you is, you know, as I've been researching these topics in the last couple of weeks, I realized how deep it actually is. And it's not that I didn't have a good understanding of what the topics of identity or personhood were before this. It's just that science has actually come a significant way from when I last checked, maybe a couple of years ago. And the updated sort of frameworks that they use are really, really profound to me. Okay? So, despite the understanding of its importance in the delivery of person-centered care, you know, I really failed to see the forest from the trees. I thought it was something that was more rote and superficial in the way we did it. You know, it's an about you section. You know, your cultural or your spiritual beliefs. You know, is that a one-word answer? Is that a paragraph? Could be either, okay? But is it important? Does it have clinical relevance to the job you're doing, all right? And so hopefully we can go on a journey together through science to understand how these topics work together to form not just clinically relevant information, but the most clinically relevant information. At least that's my belief. And that is why we have put so much time and effort into working on your language. You know, is it actually just fluff, or is it actually relevant performance-enhancing training? You know? So, hopefully this talk has an opportunity to resonate with you like it did with me. But I just want to thank you guys for giving me the opportunity to research and talk on something that I found very interesting. Okay, so we're going to start by looking at one of the age-old philosophical questions of who am I? All right? So there's been a lot of academic rigor on this topic. And it's something that I personally have pondered too. All right? So before we kick off, does anyone want to give a go? Like, who are you? What makes up your identity? Does anyone have any idea?
Your beliefs.
Your beliefs?
Culture.
Culture?
Environment.
Environment?
Your role.
Your role?
Your occupation.
Your occupation?
Experiences.
Your experiences?
Memories.
Memories. Okay, yeah. All of those are traditionally correct, right?
You're wrong.
They are right. It's just that they group them, all right? And so on my sort of meta review of all the literature on the question of who am I personally group things into three categories that generally science seems to agree with, right? So there is the independent self, right? That's you, your gender, your body, your job, your achievements, your professions, values, beliefs, personality characteristics, work, hobbies, likes, dislikes, and it focuses on your individuality, all right? So that's one aspect of your identity. The second is the independent self, right? So this is your relationships with your friends, your partner.
What was the first one?
Independent self.
What's the second one?
Interdependent self.
Oh,
It's also confusing for people too. So interdependent self is your relationship with others as a friend, a partner, a mentor, a caretaker, a parent, or a well-wisher. Okay? It focuses on partnerships and your role in your immediate circle of influence. Alright? And then the final part is your meta-personal. Right? This is your vision, your purpose, your sense of spirituality, your mission on earth, your philosophy, oneness with something in the universe. Alright? These guide your long-term vision about who you want to be and how you want to have an impact in this universe. This focuses on the community and purpose and your overall plot in the story of life. Right? So all three aspects need to intersect like a Venn diagram in order to find your identity. Alright? But how does one then lose their identity or get confused with their identity? Does anyone want to take a guess?
changes. You retire, you lose your occupation, your relationships change.
Yeah.
The divorce, you might not know where to fit in family dynamic.
Exactly.
As you age, you lose a lot of independence you previously had.
Yes. That is exactly correct. So effectively, you start to blur your sense of identity. So your sense of self and your sense of identity get blurred. You get less focus on what it is that you are and what you stand for when the three conditions aren't met, right? So your identity is a balance between these three conditions: your individuality, your relationships, and your meta-personal development, all right? And when they're out of balance, so you either have too much long-term vision, or you have too little focus on your body, or you don't make time to go see your friends, your identity starts to blur. You become a core conflict inside yourself, all right? And that has a lot of expression outside, even though you may not be aware of it. That's called a psychosomatic reaction. So you are physically reacting to an internal change of state in your body, right? And similarly, fixating on one part of your identity, like your disease or your disability or your disorder or your professional role, body image, can severely undermine other important features of your identity. And it can make you feel less in control of yourself. So, while this conceptually makes sense, all right, what I found researching was science has actually gone a little bit deeper on this concept, because this is a very good broad overview of what makes up an identity and how we can control factors to be able to bring people closer to their core identity, or to identify when they're far away from their core identity and try and contain the situation a bit better. Okay? But it does have a sort of philosophical or sociological problem, right? And that problem is that your personal identity is both evolving and changing over time as your circumstances change, but then your identity is also fixed. Like if I say, who is Shoba, there is a fixed answer right now, right? But at the same time, it's incongruent to have two concepts, one that can evolve and one that's fixed. So what they did was they split it into two characteristics. So we're going to go a little bit deeper to identity now. All right. So the next level down is stratifying identity into two concepts. All right. So the two concepts are personhood and personal identity. Okay? So, can anyone guess what the difference between personhood and personal identity is?
How you see yourself and how others see you.
Almost, but not quite.
Maybe one's based on physical experience and the other is mental.
Also almost, but not quite. So the difference is actually time. Alright? So your personhood is a snapshot of who you are at any point in time. And your personal identity exists over a long period of time, constantly changing and evolving with your experiences. Okay? I picture it like an old film projector. Alright? The one with a large reel of film on it, and the reel of film has the whole film, beginning to end, frame by frame. Alright? That's your personal identity. Alright? Each frame then becomes your personhood as it's projected onto the screen for others to see and interact with. Okay? And the projector itself, alright? What connects these two things? Alright? What bridges the divide of time itself to connect this long-term view of yourself with a very stable snapshot view of what others see you as? Can anyone guess? What connects your personal identity, your long-term view of yourself and everything you gain, to that short-term, locked-in-time snapshot of yourself that gets projected onto people for other people to interact with? What do you say, age? No?
I think the short-term part's also if you're really being true to yourself.
True.
Over the life experience that you had of like 10, 15 odd years, once you put in that situation as a test, would you still reject the morals that you've grown up with versus who you actually are?
Well, it's important to understand that your identity is relational, right? So regardless of what you're projecting, what is actually received is how other people view your projection. And the projection holds all these traits. So your personality, your personal identity holds traits like honor, integrity, love, virtue. But those only get projected in part by something. But we're looking at what bridges the divide. So no, we haven't had any correct answers yet. What bridges the divide?
Good try, everyone.
Yeah, good try. What bridges the divide, and I found this particularly eye-opening, was your decisions or your habits. All right? So the thing that connects your long-term understanding of who you are as a person with the short-term projection that other people ask when they say, who are you or what's your name, all right, is actually the habits that you build. Okay? And so in it, we get our very first nugget of gold for understanding person and identity, right? And so if you ever found yourself confused about how to do the mission of VC, helping older Australians live the life they desire, all right, we can use this study to help guide us, right? You exist to connect who they are with who they want to be by supporting them to develop the correct habits. To say in another way, personhood exists in the moment, but the personal identity unfolds across time. Habits are the thread that weaves them together. Okay, so how are we all feeling about the concept of identity? Good. Yeah? Makes sense so far? Everyone's following? All right, because we're about to go another level. Yes? Yeah? No, it's okay. We're just flicking a coin and letting the tap spin. All right? All right. Now we're going to break down each of these elements. We're going to break down personhood and we're going to break down personal identity and see if we can facilitate any further learnings to inform better practice. All right? So, I'm I need you all to join me on a journey in a time train as we go back to 1979 and study personhood. We find ourselves in the UK at the University of Sheffield. The Vietnam War is over, and people are wondering what the next thing that'll come up is. All right, and there's a certain guy at this university called Dr. Tom Kitwood. All right, and he is currently pissed off with how people with dementia are being treated, and he's decided to do something about it. Research stuff. All right.
That's way to go.
Yeah, exactly. All of us. But in any case, Dr. Tom, he did a pretty good job. All right. So what was his bone to pick in specific? Kitwood's study challenged the dominant biomedical model of dementia, which reduced people to their cognitive impairments and framed the disease particularly in terms of loss. Okay? His key argument was that dementia is not just a neurological decline, it is a condition experienced socially, and the preservation or erosion of personhood depends heavily on how others respond to the individual. Using this argument, he defined personhood as a standing or status that is bestowed on one human being by others in the context of a relationship or social being. Okay? So your personhood, your identity can only be obtained by your connection with others. Alright? So if ever you guys thought you had a really strong internal locus of control, your sense of self was rock hard, it can't be shaken, just remember that it still requires other people to validate that in order for that to be the truth. Okay? So Tom Kitwood's work on personhood in dementia was not a single experiment. Alright? It was a longitudinal study over a decade. Alright? And it took a long-term interdisciplinary research program that developed in the late 80s and early 90s, culminating in his landmark book, Dementia Reconsidered, The Person Comes First. Okay? So his research was qualitative, observational, and practice-based. It was not clinical, it was not statistical, but it drew heavily from, literally, him and his team going into random care homes, random nursing homes, and just observing the interactions in dementia care homes and day centers. He recorded carer-client exchanges, noting both verbal and non-verbal behaviors, and his aim was to capture real-life relational dynamics, especially those that undermined or supported personhood. Right? So that was his aim. He wanted to go in, check out how people were living with dementia, see what the carers were doing, see what the clients were doing, and then see if he could make something of this big mess. All right? And so what he did was he coded everything into two different categories. All right? So one was malignant social psychology, MSP, behaviors that diminished personhood. Okay? And the other one was positive personhood. All right? Behaviors that preserved or enhanced personhood. Okay? So Kitwood observed and classified behaviors that damaged personhood in dementia care to include disempowerment, infantilization, objectification, outpacing, labeling, and ignoring. Okay? All of these behaviors were unconscious but harmful and ultimately ended in people feeling dehumanized with the condition. Okay? On the flip, he also noticed a bunch of good behaviors, also unconscious, and they formed a positive work person. All right? And the care behaviors that enhanced personhood, okay, were recognition, validation, negotiation, play, and celebration. Okay? This research went on to become the foundation of person-centered care. He created an entirely new way of assessing people with dementia called dementia care mapping. All right, where it put the person right in the center of the map, and then it looked at every behavior that might trigger him, every environment that might set them off, and it worked to eliminate all of these things. And what did we find? People with dementia were pretty easy to manage. All right? This model has also been the basis for the international best practice in the Netherlands, the De Hogwick model, where they, in the Netherlands, you may have heard Teeman, myself, or Gemma comment on this in the past, but we originally, our proudest failure was to build a dementia village like the one that was available in De Hogwick. But what they do is they build small 6-bedroom houses for people with dementia. It's all one level, it's got 1 to 2 carers among 6 houses, but the way they manage their care is all throughout 2 core things. One, they group people by their life story. All right, so that means they take into account your cultural beliefs, your spiritual beliefs, then they group them all together. So there's an Indonesian house, and in the Indonesian house, Indonesian food gets cooked. So you have this anosmic sensation of being back home. All your decorations are all like, I don't know, Indonesian Buddhist stuff or something like that. And they feel comfortable, they recognize their surroundings. And it's especially important in dementia as people start to regress to an earlier phase in their life, right? It's not so much that they're not old, but their memory thinks they're like 36 and still living, back home in Italy or something like that. That's why they revert to Italian instead of, speaking in English that they've been speaking in 40 years. And that's why they get confused when people talk to them in English and they can't see all their Italian nomenclature around. And when they get confused, they have no way to reconcile all that emotion in their body, so it manifests as behavioral problems. It manifests as biting, it manifests as swearing, it manifests as wandering, all right? And what they found was just creating this environmental change really reduced all these frequent flyers on what's called BPSD behaviors, the behavioral and psychological symptoms of dementia, all right? And they became really easy to manage. And then it facilitated de-prescription, which is the second pillar that they operate on, right? Because when people didn't need medication to manage all their behaviors that were running rampant, they could just take them off the medication, all right? It's only when they need to be doped up so they're not just setting the place on fire that medication really comes into play. And so, yeah, all of these things all came from Kipwood's study on personhood and understanding how a person could be first, even when the loss remains. Okay? Now we're going to try something. And I'm not sure if this is going to work, but we'll give it a shot. Okay? I will need Teeman to come up to the front, take a seat, if you will.
None of this is
I
big
think
crude
he's
globally.
No, seat first. Okay.
He's one I prepared earlier.
All right, so what we're going to try and do is recreate one of Kipwood's experiments, all right, from the study that I just wrote, okay? This was one of his most powerful experiments to help people, like help carers and care staff, understand how to put personhood first. Just a demonstration, not sure how it's going to go. Andy, Ahmed, you two can be my assistants. Please come to the front. Yeah, okay. Now, Andy and Ahmed are going to be living the dream of every Vitality Club employee, past and present. They are going to be TPing their boss. So, gentlemen, if you can just grab a toilet paper. Okay? And we're going to wrap Teeman in a roll of toilet paper all the way up to the top. And each layer is going to represent a loss of a sense from getting dementia. All right? So I think both of you use one toilet paper and just like,
You sound very enthusiastic.
Look, I need you guys to figure out the best way to do this, but there's quite a lot of layers. Yeah,
Go.
I think you guys one front, one back,
Run,
just
run,
pass
run.
around.
Wrist too easy.
I'm giving you new volunteers.
Go pull it.
There you go, now go over it.
All the way around.
There we go.
There we go.
Yes.
There we go. See you later, Teeman.
Alright, I'm gonna mummify you.
Ah, shit.
Mummify him.
Alright,
Alright.
All right.
I decided what it is. I was adding
Guys,
outside.
Melon, breathe.
No.
Hold your breath. That
Cover
explains
his
a lot.
legs as well. Yeah, so in this experiment, Tom Kit would grabbed a whole bunch of carers and people with dementia, and he wanted them to feel more empathy for the people. He wanted them to feel what happens when you take personhood away from a person. Okay? And so in order to do this, he got a couple of volunteers and he covered them in toilet paper.
This one need 3 quarters.
Yeah.
Go back to the head.
Yeah, no, well, we'll just do the top half, because it's a lot.
Oh,
of
I see.
Yeah, okay. All right. So, as I said before, each layer symbolizes a loss experienced in dementia. All right? The first loss, cover his mouth.
Let's roll.
Yeah. All right. So the first loss is the loss of language. Okay. As we cover him in toilet paper, I would ask him how he's feeling, but he can't talk, so there's no point, right?
Still be accurate.
Yeah. All right. That'll do. Now, gentlemen, we're going to start with the next layer. Yeah, step. Yeah. Yeah. Next is the loss of control. All right? You don't actually control how your body functions and works anymore. All right? You don't actually have that ability. Keep rapping.
The legs. Okay.
The legs, all right.
Straight up the legs.
The next one is the loss of identity. All right? You remember why things matter to you, but you don't remember why. I liked fixing things, but I don't remember that I was a mechanic. All right? I have lost the part that stores my identity, but I still have feelings around the things I used to do. Unfortunately, I've also lost my language. I can't communicate that with anyone. Okay. The next one is the loss of my autonomy. All right? As he sits here covered in toilet paper, what's the next thing that's going to happen to him? Someone's going to pick him up, put him in a wheelchair, put him in a shower, take him to a dinner table, leave him in front of the TV, come back. He has expressed no choices. All right? He doesn't have the ability to communicate, so no one asked. He doesn't have the ability to say no, so we just assumed. The next is the loss of meaningful activities. All right? The things that really used to give him a sense of joy, something to look forward to. Well, can he really do them anymore? No, he's covered in toilet paper. But most importantly, no one cares. You know, he's had his lunch, he's had his shower, all right? Why does he need to do something else? Like, go sit around and play bridge, all right? He can barely pick up the cards, he's lost his control, all right? And finally, the last layer is the loss of social roles, okay? So no one actually comes to you because you have no more value. You're not a grandfather, a friend, or probably a teacher, not a student. You are just a person covered in toilet paper. And so in the end, we see how as you lose these layers, all right, and as you become more covered, you become immobilized, you become dehumanized, unable to speak, unable to move freely, unable to be recognized as a person. And so Kitwood ended his experiment like this. He said, look at this person, who should have more toilet paper on him, but I wouldn't have how do we care for this person? What does this person need? Could be scissors.
Please.
And the most amazing thing is, Kitwood's hypothesis was the most important thing is the person under the toilet paper. Despite the fact that they can't move, can't talk, can't engage in meaningful activities, or have no one who recognizes them for a role other than being a dependent in a nursing home, all right? We still can manage to medically improve their quality of life by recognizing that this guy still exists. We can do that through shared stories, remembering things for them, sharing joy, working collaboratively. Yeah. And so, as we finish up with Teeman, we ask, how may our own unconscious biased behaviors contribute to eroding personhood? Okay? What might it feel like to be treated as a task, a body, or a burden? What is the importance of seeing beyond the disease to the person still inside? Okay? And so Kim Wood identified 5 essential emotional needs. Okay? He identified that this guy needs comfort, he needs to be soothed, he needs attachment, he needs secure relationships, he needs inclusion and social belonging, he needs occupation and purposeful activity, and he needs identity and recognition of self. That is far better than any drug that he could be given. But it also really nicely leads us into the second part of our talk, which is personal identity. And it leads us into that because all those 5 things are actually traits that are developed from your personal identity. That his personhood is saying, I need to have them acknowledged in order to feel like a human and not just the toilet paper monster. You can take it. We're done. Yeah. Thank you, Peter.
You better reuse this too.
You've got a big set plan. Thank you. And thank you guys. Excuse me. Let's keep it on the side. Okay, so all of those things are actually housed in your personal identity. All right? So our personal identity refers to our sense of who we are as individuals and members of social groups. It refers to our sense of how many others perceive and label us. We develop ideas about our identity and the identities of others through interactions with people close to us, like our family, friends, schools, and other institutions, the mass media, or our encounters with history. All right? And to recap, our personal identity is not static or self-contained. It is created through social roles, cultural norms, memory, and meaningful occupation. Aging can involve the loss or transformation of roles, e.g. worker, parent, carer, and this shift needs to be supported and recognized. All right? That is the most optimal available therapy to a person who is transitioning into the later stages of life. First, we recognize and validate that you are changing your role, and that is tough. All right? And then we support them. We say, well, you can already do so much, so we'll continue doing those. And what did you used to enjoy? Great. Let's make some goals around doing that. Okay? That is as simple as it gets. Okay? But to go another layer deep, and now we're at our 3rd level of inception, which is the limit the movie did. We go to look at another philosopher, Erik Erikson. And Erik was rebelling against his fate to be known more than just Erik's son, Erik. He created a framework for understanding your personal identity through 8 stages of psychosocial development. All right? So Erik posited that your personal identity is shaped throughout your life in 8 stages, each of which you have to reconcile a core question. All right? And if you can successfully reconcile that core question, you will gain a virtue. And that will help you, that will stay with you throughout your entire life. Okay? So, the 8 stages of development start at infancy. So 0 to 1.5 years. All right? The psychosocial conflict that you have to resolve is trust versus mistrust. Okay? And the core question is, can I trust the world? Okay? And the way you demonstrate that to a little infant is feeding them regularly. all right? Soothing them when they cry. And then they can understand the world and they gain a virtue of hope, all right? They gain the capacity to hope throughout their life, all right? In early childhood, 1.5 to 3 years, all right? We come against a psychosocial conflict of autonomy versus shame and doubt, all right? Can I do things myself or must I always rely on others, okay? And if you can resolve that conflict correctly, the suggested activity is potty training, also choosing your food. You gain the ability of will. You can exert your will on the world. For preschool, 3 to 5 years old, we have initiative versus guilt. Is it okay for me to try things and take initiative? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. But if you resolve that, you get purpose. You're allowed to have a will and direct it to your purpose. School age, 5 to 12. Industry versus inferiority. Can I make it in the world of people and things? And the virtue you gain from answering that question is competence. Adolescence, 12 to 18. Identity versus role confusion. Who am I and where am I? And in that, you gain fidelity. You gain the ability to believe in the truth of yourself. Young adulthood, 18 to 40, the core conflict of most people in this room. Can I get a guess? What's the conflict?
What is life?
Almost, but no.
What am I doing with my life?
Almost, but no. No.
Be a bit calmer with your nose.
No, it's intimacy versus isolation. Can I love and be loved? And with that, you get a healthy relationship with the concept of love. Middle adulthood, 40 to 65, so as we can see, the gap's getting bigger. Generativity versus stagnation. Can I make my life count? All right? And from that, we get care. All right? Late adulthood. Ego integrity versus despair. Did I live a meaningful life? You review your life, its impacts, what's left, and finally, you gain wisdom. And that was where I thought it all ended. I personally have given a speech about 10 years talking about my views on ego integrity and despair, and that was pretty much as far as I took the whole thing. Until I started researching this. And while ego integrity versus despair is 65 to the end of your life, all right, a long final chapter where you consider and watch play out how meaningful your life is. But then Eric's wife, Joan, came in and mansplained his own research to him. I can just imagine sitting in bed and him being like, oh, I did it, PhD's done, research submitted, and she's like, it's okay. And his wife, Joan, came up with a 9th stage. And this one really blew my mind. Okay? So the 9th stage is called very old age. She suggests it for 80 to 90 plus. Okay? And she says the 9th stage is actually very interesting because in it, you end up revisiting all of your old conflicts again. All right? So you go back and you go through ego integrity versus despair. Was it okay to live my life? Generativity versus stagnation. Did I make it count? Can I love and be loved? But with the added wrinkle that your physical body has faded. So, do all of these things exist without me physically being there? Can I exist in a situation where when I'm not there, I still can gain value and be value? Okay? And your virtue that you get, according to Joan, is that you transcend the mortal coil. Transcendence, because you no longer need to be human to feel human. And it's so powerful that in our last stage, when we think about all of these things, we're actually compressing the timeline at our weakest to go through everything again. I found it really, really insightful. Each of the previous 8 challenges re-emerges in reverse order, often intensified by frailty, illness, or loss. For example, a person might revisit identity versus role confusion as they stop working. Autonomy may reappear when they need help with their daily tasks, autonomy versus shame. And at the stage, it asks the question, can I accept and integrate these losses while maintaining a sense of self and meaning? So we're going to finish here on that thought. And to take us out, I want us all to close our eyes. All right? And for this, I'm going to start painting you guys a little picture. And then we're going to go through each of these core concepts. Okay? So to start with, our goal is to empathize with the very end of the film. All right? The last couple of frames before the credits roll. All right? And in it, I want you to think of yourself, 90 years old, waking up, back aches, legs ache, it's cold, I feel it in my bones. Gotta get up, bowels full, make it to the toilet. Finally, have a cup of tea, sit on my porch, and watch the sun rise. And I think about these questions because that's all I can do anymore. Did my life matter, even now, when I am no longer who I was? Can I maintain my sense of meaning when my abilities decline? Can I accept the totality of my life, including my regrets? Am I still contributing, or have I become a burden? Do others benefit from my presence, my wisdom, my being? Is there any value in my current existence? Can I still be loved and connected, even when I need help? Can I trust that I am old and I am not alone, even as my peers die or my roles change? Am I still someone worth knowing intimately? Who am I now that I am no longer working, active, or fully independent? What remains of me when memory, profession, and mobility shift? Can I reframe my identity in light of loss? Am I still capable of doing anything well? Is there any role in which I can feel useful or competent? Can I take pride in small symbolic acts? Do I have the right to assert my needs or my ideas? Can I still make choices that matter? Or should I stay out of the way? Is it shameful that I need help with the simplest things? Do I still deserve respect when I can't dress or feed myself? Am I dignified, even in physical weakness? Can I still trust others to care for me kindly and with respect? Will I be seen and not ignored? Can I let go and be safe in the hands of others? Now I want you to just sit and think about all of those questions as you picture yourself. And as we keep our eyes closed, I'm going to end on 5 quotes from Joan Erickson. All right? In the 9th stage, we are all faced with the challenges of early life, now intensified by physical frailty and mental decline. The loss is real, but the person remains. Diminishment of body and mind must be met with the grace of others. Those who see the beauty of being even when the doing fades. At this final stage, we become dependent on others, not just for our needs, but for our identity to be held and mirrored back to us. To be old is to feel invisible. The task is to be seen, not just looked at, but truly seen in our fullness, our frailty, our humanity. And finally, love in the 9th stage is not about romance or passion, but about presence. The presence of those who chose to stay. Thank you. Just ask some questions. Does anyone have any questions? All right.
I don't know how everyone else received it, but yeah, wow. That was very thought-provoking, and I think we do sometimes fail to connect the task with the meaning, and writing about someone's cultural background or their hobbies or spiritual beliefs isn't just a task, it's like the core of making them feel seen, and I feel really more connected to the things that we ask everyone to do, so thank you for that.
I, wrapped in toilet paper in the middle, actually felt really alone. I felt like everyone was laughing at me and no one actually cared how I felt inside of this, so it actually works quite well in terms of giving me that perspective. Guys, we're finished with the first couple of sessions. We're going to break till 11:15. Try and be back here about 11:10. I've got some like pastries and things upstairs. The kitchen's just upstairs, so everyone's hanging around there. We make some coffees, make some